All right. Welcome everybody again, and thanks for joining our global webinar day. Today's topic is return on investment for StableNet. My name is Paul Kurczynski. I'm one of the sales executives here at Infosim Inc. in the USA, and I'm joining you today from our regional office in Austin, Texas. And also joining us today is our presenter, Jim Duster, CEO of Infosim Inc. And Jim joined our company here in January, and he is responsible for business strategy and leading our sales and marketing team here in North America, Central America, and also South America as well. Jim is a graduate from the University of Iowa and initially began his career as a CPA and controller before moving into more executives roles with software companies such as Software Spectrum and NetQoS. In fact, Jim and I are both NetQoS alumni, and that was a great run. Prior to joining Infosim, Jim was a senior director of sales at SailPoint here in Austin, Texas as well. Welcome, Jim. Good afternoon.
Hey, Paul. How are you today?
I'm doing pretty good. Before we get started, Jim, I just want to let everybody on the phone know that all attendees will be placed in a listen-only mode in an attempt to keep down the background noise. So if you do have questions, we highly encourage them. Just go ahead and enter them at the bottom of your GoToMeeting window in the Q&A site or the Q&A portal there. And a couple more housekeeping items. Please note that this webinar is recorded, and a copy of the recording will go out via email tomorrow. And you'll have access to the recording as they're archived. So Jim, without further ado, I'll go ahead and hand it over to you and let you kick it off.
Well, perfect. Thanks very much, Paul. Appreciate the introduction, and good afternoon, everybody on the webinar. Thanks for joining. So the topic today is return on investment for StableNet. I'll pull up the agenda here next. There's 3 sections to this presentation. The first one is, why would anyone buy network management technologies in the first place? It's kind of asking the fundamental question first, emphasis on the why. The second section is going to drill a bit more into mapping a technology purchase to the business value of making that purchase, and actually have some examples of pure StableNet technology. How do you get that in the term of a value to a customer? And then the third section is around calculating a value. It's cool to have tools and everybody wants new ones, but when you go upstairs, you have to be able to show that what you're going to do with this purchase, the value is larger than the cost. And so that section is kind of cool. I have a couple of tools that I can share with you. I'll show you how to use them, and Paul will be able to get those to you if you like them. So we're going to start with those sections. The first one, again, is why would anyone buy network management technologies in the first place? And what we found is there's 3 main business reasons that people buy Infosim products. The first one is to achieve goals. The second is to solve problems. The third is to satisfy needs. And what's really interesting is extracting these 3 elements and then translating them into value. And so I'm going to attempt to do that during this segment. Talk about goals, problems, needs that we run into, and then how do you translate them. So if I start with the first one, this is the top reason to buy. People come to us and to you, our partners, and say, I have a goal. And what's important is to listen to those goals in reference to who has it. So I've put up 4 different titles here. I'll start at the top. You have CIO goals. This actually happened to me in my second week at StableNet. Was talking to a regional cable TV service provider in the Midwest, and when we asked him what his goal was, he said, I care about our customers accessing our website and being satisfied. In fact, our website is where they go to provision stuff. That's where they choose Netflix movies or turn on a new station or pay their bill. He said, I want to increase that customer satisfaction, that feeling they get when they're dealing with me versus my competitors. Many times at the CIO level, it's an unplanned change that messes them up. I mean, they have plans that they lay out by quarter, by year, and when there's unplanned things like outages, like network things that affect the business, that becomes a goal that they're trying to minimize. As you go down the list here, the next one is Director of IT goals. A little different perspective, typically around maximizing the use of resources. Directors will be given a set of resources and say, get what you can get out of this. You know, the more the better. They also are literally in a room with other directors in the business. You can imagine the director meeting table, and all the other directors look at him and go, you're the guy to make sure my applications perform. And so he has sort of this dual, I've got to do things faster with less, but I've also got to perform on applications for my buddies here around the table. Third one's an interesting one. It's typically the manager of our users, so this is a network executive. He typically has a set amount of people, and the tickets just keep rolling in. So it's a fear of his that he just will never keep up. They constantly get paged. They try to do new projects and they can't because they're stuck in responding to issues that come up unexpectedly. That guy also has a budget. And then finally, my personal favorite down at the bottom is the finance executive. And, you know, focuses reduce IT costs. They are very concerned about leveraging existing investments. So they want to know, okay, how does this fit into what we've already spent? Remember, you guys bought something last year or 2 years ago. Also likes to better predict spending. So the purpose of thinking about it from a goals aspect when you're thinking about value is to listen for these, write them down, make sure the customer or prospect knows you've heard it, and then find a way to translate that goal into a value statement. That value statement will come in handy for you and your project leader at the customer or project later when they go upstairs. They're going to have to defend a price, and so you just got to be ready for that. And the best one is a goal. So if this is like the #1 reason to buy, also the best way to get a value. The second on the list of what's a good reason to buy our technologies is problems that come up. And here what you want to do is attach a feature or two to the problem that the customer or prospect said, and then again translate it into something that's a value statement. So in the middle there I have a current problem. IT is having difficulty assessing the source of user problems. When the help desk receives complaints, it just takes too long to isolate and resolve issues. We have a feature called root cause analysis that can help with that. And so what you do is you turn that problem into a value statement and focus on the words, would it be helpful if? If you can say those words, you're getting ready to say, and this is valuable to you, and oh, by the way, here's how much value. So in this case, we go, when performance problems occur, would it be helpful if you and your staff could access, through a single graph on a web browser, things like response time metrics for all your apps, the network, server delay, for all users in all locations. And so again, you're converting features into the solution of a problem. In this case, to get to the value, you might ask a question like, about how many tickets a day does everybody work? Oh, each engineer, they do about 10. Okay, how many engineers do you have? Oh, there's 10 of them. And about how long does each ticket take? Well, I can tell you that. We've been averaging about an hour. So what would the value be to you if we could reduce that time by 10 minutes? And now you're in the way of calculating a value. You can take 10 tickets, 10 people, 10 minutes, and figure out what the value is. So that's the trick. Take a problem, convert it to a value statement, and actually calculate a value. So here's a little challenge for you. I just took another feature of ours, Network Change Configuration Management. What do you think might be the current problem? How would you translate that into a would it be helpful if? Here's a couple of ideas. Current problem could be, I have 3 different tools that we keep our configuration information in. There is no single repository. When I actually get something that needs this information, a problem that requires it, I have to check in 3 different systems, and that takes a lot of time. Would it be helpful if there were one system of record where all changes were logged? It would reduce the time entering data into the different systems. It could allow for automation of changes. It could give you one spot to check. How about auto discovery? Would it be helpful if your NCCM solution had auto discovery that brought some information to bear instead of you go looking for it in 3 different systems, something pops up. And again, when you get the head nodding that really would be helpful, then you've got to say, well, about how much would that save you? How much time or trouble or energy or effort? So that was a couple of examples of problems. The third reason to buy is satisfying needs. And this one is actually really cool. I would give you the analogy, and you aren't meant to read this, but I'm going to tell you about that piece of paper you're looking at. The analogy is you go into your doctor's office. What's the first thing they do, especially when you're a new patient? They hand you a piece of paper, and it's got 50 questions on it. Has your mother ever had this? Has your father ever had that? Have you ever had this pain? Do you have pain today? Where is it? What they're doing is asking diagnostic questions so that they can figure out what your needs are so they can satisfy them. Well, you can actually use this cheat sheet, and Paul actually has copies of this he can send out to you. It's basically a set of questions that allows you to diagnose a need. Things like, how are you notified today of a performance issue? When network performance problems occur, can you tell if the links are overutilized? Are you able to see what applications and users are taking up the bandwidth? So it's literally just a set of questions that you run through. It's kind of like a doctor diagnosing it, but it helps you get that need out. And then again, it's the same drill. You take that need and turn it into a value statement. So here's an example of that. I'm taking one of those 4 people. I'll take the network executive goal. He had resolve network downtime quicker. Here are things that are responses to needs. When performance problems occur, would it help if you and your colleagues could access through a single tool response time metrics, app, network, server delay for all users in all locations, so you could quickly assign the problem to the right group? So the need, a question he would have answered is, yeah, when it comes in, it goes to 3 groups, and we wait for the 3 responses, and that takes a while. They also kind of fight with each other. They're, it's different groups in the company, and they always want to say it's not mine. So that's how you get this would it be helpful if statement in there. Then you try to translate that need satisfaction into a value statement. A couple of other examples. Once a performance problem is isolated to the network, would it help if your staff could view all the bandwidth utilization, protocol, host, conversation for every link? Same type of need on the next page here, just a couple of other examples. But I think you get the idea. It's a way to take our features, listen for needs, and then do a would it save time? Would it help you? And then once you get that head nodding, you then go into a calculation mode. You use someone in the group to give you some statistics, and you translate that need into how much. So to summarize this first section, there's 3 reasons people would look at our capabilities: business goals, solving problems, satisfying needs. If you don't get one of these, you have no project. Because if you can't get one of these, you aren't going to be able to get to a value statement, and no matter what you do, no matter how good the POC is, someone upstairs is not going to spend money for that investment. If they don't see the return, they just simply won't spend it. So to summarize that first section, it's all about the why. Now that we know a little bit more about, okay, I know I've got a map from my technologies to the value of making a purchase, I want to practice that with you a bit. And I'm going to use some customer situations. The reason why I believe this is so important is, if you look at these analyst statements, it's the first time in my career I've ever seen all the analysts agree on something. Gartner says it's 60% more likely if you have a cost justification, you'll get approved. Information Week says 82% you need that cost versus benefit. Industry standard goes so far as saying if only those solutions that give this are even being considered, and IDC agrees with them. So analysts say this is the way to support your project with an ROI value statement. Here's an example from a customer that over a period of time went from the pie chart on the left to the pie chart on the right. And so what you can see is on the left, about a dozen tools. On the right, over time, they were able to replace those tools with the blue StableNet color over on the right. So what does this mean? How do you put this into a value statement? Well, I would look at this and go, went from 12 to 5 tools. That sounds like a 50% reduction in tools. Something a CIO would say. That's a good goal for a CIO. I'm going to reduce the tools. How could that save money? Well, it actually might save maintenance overall. If you think about it, the person on the left was getting a dozen maintenance bills. They got one from NetCool, another one from Cisco Works, eHealth. Everybody sends in a maintenance bill, and typically the sum of those bills is more than the consolidated bill for that feature set from a single provider. And StableNet does bear that out. The other value you get is, think about training over on the left. You literally would have to schedule 12 vendors for training. What are you going to do, one a month? That's a lot of different sessions for each tool. All have to be scheduled. You're pulling people out. Versus on the right, you have one provider. You can schedule 1 or 2 a year and kind of catch everybody. How about the interchangeability of staff? If you have one person who knows NetCool over on the left, what happens if that person leaves? You've got to go out and find a specific skilled person who knows how to do NetCool. What if you had the scenario on the right where, the staff says, oh, we all know StableNet. Yeah, there's a few new capabilities that are NetCool-like that we have to learn, but they know the system. They're in a familiar system. And so you capture those values from this visual. I'll show you another visual. This is a picture of a NOC. It was actually from a prospect of ours. And I took a little bit of a liberty. If you look at the two guys sitting there, the guy in the purple on the right, well, over to the right of him was the closet where they keep their lunches. It's their lockers. I took the liberty of putting the StableNet branch view screen in there. And so you go, well, how does that help in any way? How does that increase the value? Here's things that it can happen. Look at the lower right-hand corner. You kind of can't see them, but there's a hand of somebody in another screen. Well, think about this room. There's actually 50 people sitting off to the right. And these 50 people are all running different tools, doing different things, some of which overlap, many of which, just like in the previous slide, StableNet can enable. So can you envision fewer people in the room with one coordinated system that's unified and has views into different capabilities? Can you imagine some of the other screens going away? So the savings would come through, if there's 50 people in the room and 5 of them go to a much better life, they go to a job in the company where they're doing projects all day instead of troubleshooting, 5 people out of 50 would be about $1 million a year savings. If you just think about the cost of a person. StableNet actually has the philosophy of, we think we can automate enough activity in that NOC to do a dark NOC someday. What's a dark NOC? You turn off the lights. You don't need the humans to do that interactive, deep drilling down. You've automated that. So that's an example where you're taking one of our views and you're helping customers visualize what could really happen here and how would I save money if I did it. Here's a product screen. It's our little banana pie agent. You look at it over there on the left. That little bugger cost about $150 US. Well, we actually have customers who are pulling out $10,000 servers and replacing them with a couple of these banana pies. So think about that value proposition. I'm going to pull out 5 $10,000 servers and throw 35 Pi agents at that scenario. I've just taken away 50,000 and spent about 5. So again, you're just taking the visualizations of things that are features or products and turning them into value statements. Here's the last one. And again, I would encourage you to try to fill out that star in the lower right. You're looking at it's just a screen print out of one of our products. How would you build some value from that? Well, I would look at this and go, let's see. Those top bars look to be either fully utilized or almost overutilized links. What if those are the exact links that those customers of the CIO I talked about earlier trying to get into the website? And what if the service is so slow from that overutilization of links that 1 out of 5 customers just quits? They give up. They don't order. That could be a 20% revenue upswing by solving that problem. Take a look at the links on the bottom. In comparison, it looks like they might actually be underutilized. Could you take 4 or 5 of them and combine them? Maybe the expense of having all those separate links isn't warranted. Could you pick up some money there? So again, you're taking visualizations from our product and trying to turn them into some type of value. And so that was the second session, mapping technology to a value. Now I'm going to try to bring it all together in the last part with a couple of cool tools to help you gather that information and give it to your project sponsor and their bosses. At the end of the day, if the project is going to cost $1 million and the savings you come up with is $100,000, that project's not going to fly. If you can invert that, project is a couple $100,000, we're saving millions, you have a much better chance. So the first tool is literally a 2-slide PowerPoint deck. The first slide is this blue one. We call it the value slide. It's got 3 columns on it. The first column on the left is topics. These are places you look to find values. And I put a few suggestions in there, but there's quite a few. If you go back to that diagnostic cheat sheet, every one of those questions could turn into a topic on the left here. In the middle, you do the description. How do you calculate it? Okay, you got $1.5 million over there on the first line. How did you calculate that? So it's literally a description of the calculation. You put the numbers in the right-hand column. They all add up, and there's a nice large number in the lower right-hand corner. That's the blue slide. The next slide is more of a yellow slide. It's the cost slide. Now, the top part's pretty easy. It actually looks like one of our quotes. You've got software cost, hardware cost, services, maintenance. I would not ignore that other internal cost. Many of our competitors wouldn't throw in the cost of, they might have to assign a project manager to this project. They might have other overhead costs that they have to put in. Take them all. Don't leave any of them out. It's not like you're trying to minimize this cost. You just want to justify it, but you're going to add up to a total cost. You can see there's a blue row then, second last row. You bring the value over from the first statement, and you have a project net benefit. These 2 slides will get handed upstairs. So again, you're just creating the slide deck, helping them do it. I'm going to do one more value translation to try to fill out an actual one of these. This is an example of meeting an SLA. And so as I look at this, my thoughts would be, right now the blue bars are hanging out in the green area. Seems like the good area. I'm meeting my SLAs. What could that mean contractually? It may mean that for every bar that hits the green, I get a $50,000 major SLA bonus that month. What about the converse? What if those bars started etching over to the red and they were not meeting SLAs? What if there were penalties there? And what if your value was avoiding those penalties? That also, so you can actually take the inverse and come up with it. So here's a real live example of filling out that sheet. The top line says increased revenue, faster website selling additional channels to customers. The math there is I asked the customer about how much more revenue would that be in a year. And out of their mouth comes 1.5 million. Cost reduction, how many tickets, how many weeks in the year, cost per ticket. If it's staff, it's the man years and how much each man costs. The fourth one's interesting. We're seeing a lot of this. It's a turn off of annual maintenance. And many times those annual maintenance fees have gotten so large through an accumulation of products that are hooked to a set of capabilities that doing nothing more than turn off the maintenance can yield you enough value to move forward on a project. And then the intangible and server, these are things, again, you're just asking the question, are there any other values here? And they say, oh yeah, we're going to save that management overhead of that e-health. They also give us a little overhead fee for paying the bill every year. you know, I can pull out 3 servers if I turn off eHealth. That's another, you know, 3 times 5,000. Again, you get to 3 million in this example, and in the cost, it's very similar on the top, that 3 million, so you get a net project benefit. So that's the 2-slide deck in a PowerPoint, ready to go upstairs visualization. The last thing I'll show you is an ROI calculator. This is actually the output from the calculator. So would it be helpful if you could go upstairs when you're the project manager and the boss finally says, hey, I'm gonna decide, if you had this in a slide, you could tell them that, you know, we used a calculation tool that allowed us to determine that the payback on this investment is actually 9 months and it has a 320% ROI. And would these visuals help at all? Again, it comes out of the spreadsheet. The bar graphs on the right are showing with the tool and without the tool what the performance savings are. In the upper left is just the investment breakdown. But again, you're in 2 slides, you're trying to give information to someone who just, you know, they only got 5 minutes. So I'm going to pop out now, open my calculator. I just wanted to show you a live demo of that. Paul, can you see the yellow boxes here?
Yeah, I sure can.
Awesome. So this is our calculator sheet. You can see it's quite simple, just 3 sheets. There's an entry sheet, a C-level sheet, and an assumption sheet. The entry sheet is marked pretty clearly. You basically put input values in the yellows, and all the greens are calculated. And so it has things like the size of the company, how many employees, what their revenue is. My favorite is the hourly rate of pay. In fact, I'll change this. This says $75 an hour. And just keep your eyes over here in that box. It was 247 million. If I make it, let's just make it about 100, see what happens. You can see it just, whatever you put in these inputs, it's using assumptions to give you an output. You can do things like how long will it take to implement, over how many years do you want to consider this value. The C-level sheet is those pretty visuals. So again, this comes out, you put a customer logo here, those graphs are down preset to work based on the facts that are entered. And then finally there's an assumption, so you can personalize this to your current situation. How much is software training, it has percentages of cost, and it uses these assumptions to help in the calculation. So does that make sense? It's a little 3-tab worksheet that allows you to get to the pretty pictures that you need. So that is the 2 sets of tools. And in summary, I just wanted to emphasize the 3 areas. The why in that first session was so important. You have to find out the why they're doing it, translate those goals, problems, or needs into value. You can take any slide, any visual from our product in any POC and come up with a value statement. I would challenge you to find one that you can't. So just think of it in those terms. I'm going to get the best pictures for this situation, translate them into value statements. And then finally, you've got to somehow calculate for people what this is. We have much more experience rolling out these projects than they do. And so we've got to bring that expertise to bear and say, hey, I can help you with that. So that's the end of the presentation, Paul. Get any good questions this time?
Yeah, I've got a few questions just around trying to get a copy of the slide deck as well as the ROI calculator. So what I did is I went ahead and added my email address in the bottom there of the GoToMeeting portal. So feel free to ping me. I can send over those documents that Jim went over. But I do have a question. I think it's designed to stump you, Jim, so I hope you're ready.
Oh, boy. All
right. So what is an example of an intangible value that an organization gets when they invest in a NMS tool like StableNet?
Oh, boy, that is a bit tough. And I've been taught in my career to use the word intangible because they're always out there. I guess an example would be many times the project manager will say, you know, the real benefit here is when I free up time for network engineers, I don't actually fire them. But what I get is instead of them doing 2 projects over a course of a year, they do 3 or they do 4 or they have a way to be a little more proactive. And so kind of hard to calculate. It's like the salary's not going away, but you know, typically they will spot you. Oh, yeah, each of those projects has, you know, sort of this value impact. One other one I heard was a customer talked about his brand, and to him it was an intangible value, but he actually handed us the, you'll remember this, Paul, handed us the list of some outside third party had rated who is the provider that downloads Netflix the fastest to your house. And he said, look, I'm number one, and I want to protect that position. And his value was kind of intangible. It was like, well, what does it make any difference if you're number one? And, you know, he went into his brand story. So those things have a lot of heart and soul to them. They might not put a big number over on the right, although sometimes they do. You could ask about intangibles and get some wild numbers, but they're good things to think about.
Yeah, I do remember that example actually vividly. So I think that wraps up all the questions, Jim. You did a great job. Thanks for the presentation. I just wanted to let everybody know that if you do have any additional questions outside of the webinar, any topics related to network management in general, feel free to contact us at any time or visit our website. We've got a lot of great resources on there. And as I identified earlier in the call, there is a copy of this webinar. It will be available tomorrow in about 24 hours. You'll get an email sent to you. We are going to keep the session open for a couple more minutes in case anybody in the audience decides to challenge Jim with another question. And by the way, when you do get ready to exit the webinar, you'll be presented with a questionnaire, and we encourage you to fill that out, and that helps us pick topics for the next webinar, and also just kind of improving our delivery. So I think that's pretty much it from Jim and I. Again, thanks, Jim, and again, thanks for everybody for joining. And we'll leave this last page up for a few moments, and then we'll go ahead and close down the webinar. So thank you, and have a great rest of your Thursday and a great weekend. Thank you.
Hey, Paul, thanks a lot for hosting.
You bet.